Hey everyone, thank you for joining the AVO webinar series. This is AVO webinar number 11, and as you probably can't see right now, but Isaac is with us right now. Isaac, hello.
Yo.
So Isaac is known as Ask Yourself on different social media channels, and I believe the largest one would be YouTube. So I'm excited to have him here as a guest. We're going to have an interesting conversation, and you guys know that the webinar is called Logic versus Emotion. So I hope that we get to explore these kind of two different sides. I don't think that they're necessarily like mutually exclusive or that we have to choose between one of the two when we're talking to people about veganism and animal rights. But I'm very curious to speak to someone who I think has a lot of experience and does a really good job of representing veganism and animal rights from a logical and rational kind of mindset. So first question for you, Isaac, and this is going to be a bit of an interview style, kind of back and forth type of webinar, so much less formal than the other ones. And we're also going to have, for those of you who are watching this recording, we're going to have people contributing possibly to the conversation through the chat function in the webinar software that we're using. And if you ever want to contribute to webinars, there's another webinar coming up in 10 days on the 17th with Joshua Entis. If you want to contribute to that, join the live webinar and you can type into the chat and kind of be a part of it. So Isaac, why don't you tell, well, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, what's your background? When did you go vegan? Yeah, just give us a little intro for those of you who aren't familiar with you.
Yeah, well, I was created in a lab a while ago. Yeah, I mean, I'm 26. I'm vegan. I think I've been vegan. Pretty sure it's 5 years. It might be like 4.5. Like it's somewhere around there. Maybe it's a little over 5. It's like 5, give or take, I think. And background, I mean, pretty normal. Just grew up in Peterborough, Ontario. I got into kind of like philosophy in my late teens, and then I ended up finding out about veganism, and I felt that the arguments were strong, and I went vegan. And I don't know exactly how to describe like why I started my channel. Like, I think there's kind of a few factors there, and I think we also don't always have great access to why we make the decisions we make. But the kind of things I was thinking were things like, a lot of content right now that I see about veganism isn't just like really good, strict, like logical kind of like explanations of these points. And I just felt like I had something to deliver that would be, beneficial. And I'd like to kind of like elevate the level of discourse. And I think that was a big initial motivator. And also I had gotten to a point where, I was getting in these lengthy debates on Facebook, all in text. So eventually it hit the level that I had a Microsoft Word document with copy pasted answers. Cause I mean, I'm sure you'll know this, Alex, is, someone who's done a lot of vegan activism. There's a pretty standard set of things that Karna say. And then, every once in a while you get something out of the box, but there's pretty standard things. So, you get standard responses. I built up this big Word document. I'd copy paste them. And then I determined at one point that I wanted to kind of like, just like expedite this process by making a video where I debunk all these points. And then I would just literally just post timestamps at people when I debate them on Facebook. But then when I made that video, Vegan Gains ended up sharing it out. And then a bunch of people kind of gathered and wanted more. And then that just snowballed. And then I started, doing this. I started debating after a while, and here we are.
I couldn't agree with you more that when you do this enough, you definitely realize that there's almost these templates that people follow, that non-vegans follow, and it makes perfect sense. So yeah, it does make sense, I think. And some of the things, there are times I'm not big on scripting, and even though I come from a sales background, but I hated scripts. I just thought they were really inauthentic. Mm-hmm. But there are certain responses and certain things that I do encourage people to learn, because you're just going to hear them over and over and over again. So it's good to have something where you can depend on and save time as well, and save on energy. So I'm curious, like when you first went vegan, was there, like, I'm big on creating like aha moments for people where they have these like minor epiphanies, I guess, when I'm talking to them non-vegans. Sure. Was there an aha moment for you that you can recall? There was like, holy crap,
Certain.
like really blew your mind? Yeah.
Yeah, there's two. I just want to say one thing about scripts. So I totally agree that they're like, look, a script is kind of robotic, right? If it depends what you're doing. If you're out on the street interacting with people, you don't want to hear them say canines, then go, 1 second, like pull out your canine script and read from. But it should be to a point where in your head you basically have a script. Like you want it to reach a point where your understanding of why this argument is wrong is just like a paragraph you could write out and it would come out the same every time. When you're actually talking to someone, you have to like, put your interpersonal skills over top of that. Again, this depends on the context. If you're doing a debate, you don't have to worry about that. But if you're trying to persuade people on the street, you're going to have to overlay your interpersonal skills on that script to make it genuine and relatable. Yeah. So you asked, was there an aha moment? I'd say there's actually two for me. So I watched Earthlings with my girlfriend at the time, and the second I saw that, I went vegetarian. Now, I actually like years later used footage from it and watched it, and I realized it actually had a component about dairy and stuff in it, or eggs. So I don't know why, but for whatever reason, what registered with me after that was go vegetarian. I'm not sure. It's like maybe the whole message didn't land. So there was a significant moment there where I was just like, well, this is evil. There's no way I can support this anymore. Stop. And then a bit later, I saw Gary Yourofsky's speech. And he just laid out a pretty good case against the other products than just the meat. And I was like, oh, that stuff's evil too. Well, then I should stop this. And then I went vegan. So there's kind of like two moments there.
Okay. Yeah. Earthlings tends to be one of the vegan makers, and Yourofsky obviously has such a huge impact around the world with his. It's funny, his talk was really important for me. I think I went vegan before I saw his talk, but I mean, his talk just reinforced. I was the same as you. I saw Earthlings and I was like exactly the same thought. I can't contribute to this evil shit anymore. So I was instantly done. But yeah, Yourofsky really impacted me. He has a very unique style and a unique way of communicating. And obviously it had a big impact on me, had a big impact on a lot of people. However, I think that people, for anyone watching this, I think we have to be careful not to try and be like somebody else and not to try and emulate other people and to be more ourselves, because it's very difficult, I think, to be like Gary, like to have that style where he can just be like straight up blunt to the point and people listen to him almost like, I remember watching him thinking like, this is like my dad almost scolding me for not being vegan. But I listened. I was like, holy crap. But I couldn't get away with that. Like, I know my personality, I couldn't do what he does. So, I mean, if you are as good as Gary is, then by all means. I have a question for you, because your skill set, I think, the way that I recognize it is in debating. And I'm curious to know how you became such a good debater. Like, I don't know. How did you do it?
Well, I mean, I think that I just have a kind of brain that just meshes well with debate. Like, the way that I have always kind of aimed to think ever since developing any interest in thinking exactly, has been kind of to just I guess the way that I try to think is to think in a very linear way, where like everything that I think is reducible down to like little atomic parts that would be very hard to disagree with. Like, if we have some kind of like system for making inferences where we can like combine points according to some rules to reach other points, and then the starting points are things that are sufficiently basic that no one's going to really challenge, right? Then I'm just going to be able to build from those basic starting points using inference to get to higher up positions, but then always be able to reduce those positions down to their component bits. So I think that I could list off some other things about why I think the way I think is just good for debating, but I just have a natural kind of tendency for that. I've also always loved explaining things. And I think I care a lot about like clarity of language also. So I've spent a lot of time just trying to learn to say the thing in question as clearly as possible in as few words as possible. So like, look, there's probably a range of things that kind of make me suited for debate, but how did I get good? Like, I kind of I set a general goal, which is to articulate my point as clearly as possible in as few words as possible. And then I just debate people. And every time I do, I just notice where I could do better and just correct on it until, I get better and better, and just keep doing that. So that's kind of like how I learned. Does that answer your question okay?
Yeah, totally. Actually, maybe another question to help me understand this better is what do you feel, or sorry, when you think of the idea of being effective at debating, so being a good debater, what does that mean to you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does an effective debater do well?
Yeah, so I think that you would be able to clearly articulate why your case is correct in a way that would be very difficult to disagree with. I mean, that's like broad terms. You want something more specific?
No, no. I think that's a lot of people either want to be good at debate, or they watch a good debate and they know that they enjoy watching it. But I'm curious as to what you think people should be striving for if they want to be good at debate, and just clearly, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Just kind of clearly being able to articulate your point in a way that, I mean, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but that can be easily understood by the person with whom you're speaking, and
Mm.
is, I mean, I wouldn't say impossible, but that makes it really difficult to refute. Let's say it's impossible. I mean, that would be a good debate strategy, I would assume.
So the question is, how do you get to a point that you can say your things in such a way that they're really difficult to refute? Or I might not be fully appreciating the question. Was that the question?
Sorry, first is defining, I guess, what, maybe I asked it backwards. So what exactly does it mean to be an effective debater? And then what can people do to get to that point?
Okay. Well, it's one of those questions that I can give like a general answer, or I can give like a million specifics. So, I mean, what does it mean to be a better debater, and what can people do to get to that point? Okay. So I think that the ultimate goal is just to find the truth, right? And to be able to express the truth, which with as much clarity as possible. Um, what can people do to get there? Okay, if I had to think of like just some steps that would be helpful, I think the first thing that you want to do is learn a system of formal logic. So just go and learn propositional logic. It really doesn't take long. You could do it in an afternoon, and you'll be happy that you've done it after. In fact, we have a Discord server. You can find the link on my channel. And we have a really great software engineer in there. So I actually gave him instructions to program a propositional logic bot. And at this point, you can actually learn propositional logic just by interacting with the bot. You can type in certain commands. It's all listed there in the bot commands in the Discord, and it will actually tell you how to generate truth tables in propositional logic, and then it will give you a quiz, and it can generate like 82 billion unique quizzes. And if you can score over 90% on the quiz, it actually gives you a roll to indicate that you've done so. So I think that is one thing that is super important, because we can have our like points, like our propositions, our statements, right? Like there's like a proposition like I'm talking to Alex right now, or like the sky is blue, right? We can have our propositions, but then logic is about the rules for combining those, for making inferences from those propositions to other propositions, right? So you want to make sure that the way you're making inferences is logical.
Can
Our
you can you give us an
intuitive thing.
example? Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. So, like, if I just give you a bad inference, like, let's just say that I say, um, if Isaac is at Walmart, Isaac is not home. Isaac is not home, therefore Isaac is at Walmart. Something should
Okay.
sound weird to you, right? Like something
Right.
just should intuitively seem strange, right? If Isaac's at Walmart, Isaac is not home. That sounds clear enough. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
we don't have any disagreement there. If I'm at Walmart, unless I live in Walmart, I mean, it's obvious that I'm not at home.
True.
I'm at
Yeah.
Walmart. And then the second, so that's premise one, and then premise two is Isaac is not at home. I mean, that's relatively clear also. I mean, there's not any confusion about what that means. But then the conclusion is therefore Isaac is at Walmart. So you can tell something is weird there, because it would obviously be possible for me to be away from home and not at Walmart. So something about how the inference happened was weird. Now, an inference that would make sense if I said something like, if Isaac is at Walmart, Isaac is not home. Isaac is at Walmart, therefore Isaac is not at home. I mean, that should seem completely reasonable. So of course, if I'm at Walmart, I'm not home. So
Right.
there's basically there's a concept called deductive validity, and that is just it just basically refers to whether your premises guarantee your conclusion. Now, if we were to draw out truth tables, which is a way to kind of like show what an argument is saying and show its form, if we were to draw out truth tables, that first argument I gave you commits a fallacy called affirming the consequent. So it's not true that, you know, if P implies Q and Q, then P, right? But the other
Right.
way that I gave it to you, P implies Q, P therefore Q. I mean, that is the case. So
Right.
it can sound like a little like jargony when you haven't like kind of like looked a bit at logic, but it really is simple once you look into it. And if you understand how to make proper inferences, then that's a big component of reasoning well, because the way we think before learning actual like formal logic is very like there's lots of like bugs and lots of like weird logic jumps that we make. And you just want, if you're going to be debating, if the goal isn't like, hey, I'm going to go out and like personally resonate with people on the street and try to show them the truth. If the goal is like, I want to be able to get on stage and humiliate the other guy and show that his position is just ridiculous, so everyone
Mhm.
understands this is evil and not to be supported, and he just doesn't even know how to defend it. If that's your goal, which I understand that's not the goal of everyone, but sometimes we need to do stuff like that, then certainly you want to make sure that you're making your inferences properly. So that's one component right there, would be learning a formal language. I could give more components of, you know, being good at debating.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good start, and I'm glad that you brought up kind of the point that you did at the end there, because I'm someone who, for anyone who's watched my webinars, who's been to my talks or my workshops, they hear me always say this, and I have like these big slides that say "Stop debating." And you know, I'm happy to go into my reasons why, but I'm more curious from your point of view. Like, I think we're probably on the same page here.
I
But
do
when it
too.
comes
I think I
to,
know why you have the sense. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure you do. But for you, I guess specifically with debating, can you articulate how you see debating useful for driving behavior change, whether it's individual or societal? But how do you see debate as being useful? Because I do see it as being useful, but I'm curious. Yeah, from your point of view, why might I say stop debating, and what do you think is useful about debating?
Okay, well, I think that we're not contradicting each other, because I don't
Okay.
think that we're saying stop debating and start debating in the same sense. I think we're talking about something else. I would assume that you're saying something like don't debate people in the street, because obviously on the street the goal is to convey the message to an individual person who you're talking to, and a vital thing there is to resonate with them on an emotional level so that they're actually open to what you're saying. And if you start debating them, they'll become defensive and they won't be receptive to what you're saying, so it would shoot you in the foot. Is that why you have the stop debating sign, or is it something else?
For me, I think it boils down to this, that people, I mean, the way that you describe debating, and for someone to become a good debater takes either some inherent skills that they've picked up over their lifetime, or they have to study it to get to some level of being able to debate properly. But even still,
Sure.
even
Yeah.
when people have that, I think that what really blocks debate on topics like this are people's emotions, their egos, their
Hmm.
defensiveness, that
Yep.
leads them to be intellectually dishonest. And
Yep.
so
Yeah.
what I find happening a lot in the one-on-one conversations, to say the street outreach or the family or the
Hmm.
friend, whatever, is that debate is the most common conversation format that we choose. If we're
Hmm.
just unconscious, we just kind of go into proving that we're right, proving the other person is wrong. And the problem is nobody wants
Yep.
to be wrong. So people say
Yep.
ridiculous shit, and then you get frustrated because like, how can you say such a dumb thing? And then we don't really get anywhere. So uh, from your point of view, and you do this really well, where do you see logic debate coming in to actually move this movement forward and to actually help non-human animals?
Okay, so I can give some thoughts there, but I just want to say the way that you recap that is basically just exactly what I'm thinking. It's just not ideal for if you're on the street trying to persuade people. It's just going to make, it's going to make people defensive and not receptive to what you're saying. That's the gist of what you're saying there, right?
Yeah, pretty
If
much.
you
Because
come at,
if
yeah,
people,
I
yeah, if
agree.
people were able to remove their ego and were thinking critically and logically, absolutely. Because we know, I think we're pretty convinced that we know this. Everybody knows this, that we
Mhm.
are right. There's no real logical. There's no way to disprove what we're saying. It's so basic, but people won't allow themselves to get there. So then, obviously, I teach different tools to get people to actually make steps towards veganism. But for you, where is
Yeah,
debate really powerful and really useful? Because I think it is.
sure. Okay, yeah, so I'll answer that. Okay, so I don't know if I could give a perfect account of all the ways in which debate is good, but I think that there's two main ways that it's good, at least that I can think of right now. So, one of them is that it's good because the people watching realize that the other position is insane. So, if I debate someone and by the end they're saying that it's fine to slaughter the disabled, right? Everyone watching is like, well, that's not a position I'm going to hold, right? And you watch vegan debates and see that happen enough times that you're just like, okay, well, carnism is kind of indefensible. So I think that one component is that debate persuades the people in the audience if you do well, and then it's also worth. There's just a little side note I want to make here. This is the frame that I think a lot of people struggle with when they're in the nice guy kind of frame. In debate, you want to humiliate your opponent. Like you want to make them just look like an idiot, right? And you want to do that legitimately. You don't want to make any bad moves. Like, for example, I debated a guy today, right? And I just destroyed him. And the way that I did it was I just showed him that he literally didn't have an argument. He couldn't provide premises and a conclusion for his position, right? Now, my goal there was 100% just to humiliate him so he looks like an idiot. Now, I don't want to make people suffer or anything, but I look at it from a bigger picture perspective and I go, look, what's more important? People understanding how bad certain people's ideas are or the feelings of this person I'm talking to. So if you're the kind of person who makes the same evaluation as me there, you're going to be comfortable at least going into a situation like that and just making someone look stupid, and you win points for veganism in doing that because people watching go, okay, that other position sucks. Now there's also another benefit of debate, like clears up the philosophy. So it's easy to watch like lectures and presentations and think that you have an understanding of something, right? But it's when two frameworks really collide in debate that you find out which actually kind of comes out on top, right? It's easy to talk a good game. It's way harder when you're in person with someone and they're speaking to you. So I think that there's another benefit of it clears up vegan philosophy for vegans and how to interact with these points. And then there was, I think, a third one I was going to say. I know I just said two, but there's one other benefit of debate I was going to mention. No, it's slipping my mind. I could say more, but yeah. So I think it persuades the audience, and I think it offers clarity for people listening.
What sort of feedback have you received from your audience? Actually, even this is just a general curiosity question, but what percentage of your followers on YouTube would you say are vegan versus non-vegan? Do you have any sense of that?
No,
No
I don't.
idea.
I would
And
assume the majority are vegan.
yeah, that would make sense. And then from non-vegans, have you received feedback, and what sort of feedback have you received from your online debates?
Well, I mean, all sorts of different feedback. Like, I think the general perception when I debate someone is usually that the other guy is looking kind of crazy. Because usually when I debate someone, the end position that I get them in is something like saying it's fine to like murder people or something. Like, they usually end up somewhere like that. So generally, the feedback is like, well, that guy's position didn't pan out very well. But there's criticism. There's people who just think I'm an asshole. So there's that. And then there's the odd time that you hear from a carnist who's just like, you just trounce that guy, I'm going vegan. That happens too. But
Hmm.
I don't know, like you'd have to do some actual study to get a real good picture of exactly how debate like affects the people who are listening to it. So I see a range of responses. I don't know like the percentage rate that you get those different responses at.
Hmm. I saw that that debate where where the guy basically had to admit that it was okay to to kill disabled people. And it's such a ridiculous, and I think I remember you being like, okay, cool. Like it's over. Like that is the logical conclusion you've reached. And there's nothing else to say, because now your position is so clear that if you follow your logical conclusion, we have to be okay with killing disabled people. And it's
Right.
like, and I like that. And I noticed that with your conversations, you're not necessarily trying to convince the other person of your point of view. You're trying to draw out the flaws in their logic and in their point of view for your audience. And I think that it's really important. And I try to communicate this to the people that I speak with. Most of us don't have cameras on us, and most of us are not uploading our videos to YouTube, where we have audiences, ideally unbiased audiences, but any audience watching us debate. And so, I definitely lean on a different framework when it comes to driving behavior, like individual behavior change from those street conversations. But I want to go back to the debating stuff. Let me just quickly take a look at my questions here. Oh yeah. So one of the common criticisms, I guess, of debate when it comes to trying to use that structure to inspire behavior change is that people often leave debates more convinced of the points of view that they came in with, because they're forced to defend those points of view in the structure of that debate. Would you agree with that?
1 second. Are you talking about the person who I'm debating, or the people watching?
No, just the person you're debating. So
I think that the person you're debating is usually like a lost cause. Like anyone who's going to get on stage and defend the animal holocaust is probably already a lost cause.
Okay, cool.
I just don't.
Yeah, I was just out of curiosity, have you ever had someone after a debate where you did destroy them intellectually? Because it's, if you follow the rules of logic that you use, I think you're pretty good at it. It's pretty, I don't want to say easy to do, but if you know what you're doing, it might be. Have you ever had people come back to you, people you've debated, be like, you know what, I thought about it, and actually you have a good point? Or
yeah, of course.
Yeah, awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I don't want to be, but I'm very reluctant to make like empirical claims about the efficacy of debate, right? Like I don't know that debate is the most effective form of activism or something like this. I just think that it's something that at minimum a few people should be doing, because it has value. It shows how the frameworks collide and how to deal with those points in real time, clears up the vegan philosophy. I think that it has some kind of value, and I don't know if it's what everyone should be doing. I don't know if it's what most people should be doing, but I think that at minimum, some people should be doing it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Random question. If you could debate anybody in the world live, and have it viewed by lots of people, who would it be?
Well, it's hard because there's people who I personally want to debate, but then I have to think like, well, if I get anyone's time, then how do I be most effective? So like, I mean, I guess that the one that would probably be the best for the progress of veganism would be if I like debated Donald Trump or something, like someone who's just like the most powerful person in the world. But like, if I had to choose, if I could debate anyone, I'd like to debate Sam Harris. I would love to debate Sam Harris on veganism.
That would be super cool.
It would probably be better for veganism if I debated someone who's like way more known and has way more influence, though.
Okay, you just brought something up there, when you brought up Donald Trump, or at least made me think of something, and it's that it's that I was going to crack a joke, but no. What I was going to say was, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. No, what I was going to say is that, do you feel that debate? So here's another challenge for me with debating people. I love debating as well. I think it's fun. I think it's entertaining, and it feels good to logically destroy people. But my challenge comes with, okay, here's an analogy. Imagine you're playing chess with someone and you're a grandmaster, and you sit down and you're playing someone who just learned the rules of chess yesterday or doesn't even know the rules of chess.
Yeah.
It's like, is it just lost on people? Like, are there just some people who it's just over their heads and there's no point in doing it?
There's no, well, it depends on your purpose, right? So, like for me, I take no pleasure in sitting there debating a white belt, right? It's like, just like, you know, if like what, of course, it's not going to be a challenge if it's someone who doesn't know anything about debate. There's nothing fun about that, right? But sometimes you have to do that, right? Because sometimes there's a white belt who has a huge channel and is influencing tons of people with carnist propaganda. So even though it's kind of shameful to go in and like, you know, beat on someone who's like not even good at debating, it's like you just have to think of the greater good. Like they need to be exposed, basically. Like take Frank Tefano, right? This guy's a charlatan. He has no idea what he's talking about. It's transparently obvious to once anyone listens to him, right? You know, I'm sure Richard doesn't enjoy debating him. I'm sure that Vegan Gains, to be clear, I'm sure that he goes into those debates and is just like, oh God, this again, right? But there's a reason to actually go and do that, which is that, you know, Frank posts a video and, you know, tens of thousands of people watch it. It gets thousands of upvotes. There's a bunch of people who apparently find this garbage persuasive, right? So it's actually important, even though it's not fun to go and fight a white belt, for someone to go and just destroy someone like that. It's important. Now I've lost track of the question. The question was, is there even a point? Right. So
Well,
whether there's a
sorry,
point.
Isaac, maybe not the point of destroying that white belt, because of course, if you have an audience, I specifically, I
Right.
guess,
Yeah.
mean more the idea of intellectual debate for
Mm-hmm.
for the masses, for people who can't
Mm-hmm.
follow or are unable. Like I like to
No.
I like to think of myself as a pretty smart guy, not the most intelligent, but pretty smart. But sometimes, even when I watch you when you're debating, it's like it's going so quick sometimes, and your logic, like because you've rehearsed it or because you have that script, it's sometimes going so fast that it might even be like seldom, but it might even be lost on me sometimes. I'm like, whoa, like I might have to stop and pause and really think about what you said. Do you think that there's
Yeah.
that's a challenge for people that are watching who aren't
Yeah.
at the same level maybe as
Sure.
you are, where they can just
Yeah.
lose track of what the hell you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, this is a hard thing. This comes down to the question of what level of knowledge you want to assume your audience has, right? Like, do you want to talk as if you're talking to like people who don't know any like logic or philosophy? Do you want to assume they have like a university level education?
Hmm.
So I have to say, like, I honestly just don't like. I haven't got some like firm position here. Like, I just kind of say what feels natural to say. I do think that you can make some kind of case that if you're talking at a level that's too high for certain people, that there's like a trickle down where like the people who can hear that then get it, and then it spreads, it trickles down from them to other people. I think there's probably some truth to something like that. But yeah, no, I'd certainly grant that some people are just not going to be able to follow, and that based on what your goal is, you might want to speak at their level or not. Yeah, it's just going to depend on what your goal is there.
Yeah. And what's your, like, at the end of the day, I assume that your goal, like any other person who's a part of this movement, is to, I mean, properly advocate for non-human animals that ultimately leads to their liberation, right?
Well, obviously I want that, but when it comes to goals, like I'm always very skeptical of my own ability to assess why I'm doing things. Like if you kind of look at like psychology, like I don't know much about psychology, but there's tons of experiments where they just show that people are horrible at accounting for why they do the things they do. Like they can set up these experiments where the experiment primes you to do a certain thing. So the people conducting the experiment know the reason you've done the given thing and you don't know it. And then you generate this like ad hoc hypothesis for like why you did the thing, right? So there's tons of like psychological bugs like that. So when I try to talk about what my goals are, I try to talk in like the most broad terms. So like when I try to think what is my goal in life, I think my goal in life is to be happy and to make other people happy. I think that is like the broad goal. Um, with respect to veganism, I think that I have a few goals like behind my content. So I think there's a goal of like really establishing veganism as like a solid intellectual position. I think that there's a goal of just expressing myself. I also just enjoy debating. And yeah, I mean, there's a goal of spreading a message that I consider morally important. But I don't really have this like clear hierarchy of goals. Like that's just me rattling off things that I'm pretty sure I care about. So I'm sorry if that's an unsatisfying answer. I just think it's hard for us to account for our own kind of like motivations.
Um, I think the way that you talk about this, and one thing I've noticed from you, both like just in your answers on this webinar, but especially even like when you're under fire, when you're in a debate, and I'd love for you to speak on this topic, and I'm curious if you've thought about this consciously, but you come across, I know some people, you said some people have accused you of being an asshole, right? And I think that
Oh yeah.
yeah, in certain contexts, like when you are, you know, you're not letting off and you're intellectually destroying someone, you can come across that way. And maybe on a bit of a side note here, I think it's really important for anyone who is considering things logically to separate the speaker from their ideas. You know, I don't
Oh
need
yeah.
to like someone. I could think, and there are people who I follow online who I think are assholes, who I probably wouldn't be friends with, but that doesn't mean their ideas are wrong, you know? And I think we fall into this trap too much in society. Like, that person's an asshole, so what they're saying is wrong. Like, that's,
Yeah.
I can't even.
Yeah.
um,
No, no, no.
yeah. But
Yeah.
what I was gonna get at here was, that was a little bit of just a soliloquy, I guess. What I was gonna get at
It's
here is, one thing that I have noticed with you in your debates is, I've noticed a sense of humility in a way where you will admit when either you've said something wrong or incorrectly, or someone's made a good point. You will concede because otherwise, you're not doing what you're proclaiming to be doing, which is being logical, right, and purely logical. So, can you maybe talk a little bit about the need? I'm assuming it's necessary. I think it is, but the need to be humble yet confident. You know, not arrogant in your position, but do you see a need for humility in debate, I guess, is my question to you.
Yeah. Now, I think this is one of those things that a lot of people perceive really weirdly, because I think that I actually do have a lot of humility, but I also will be firm when I'm comfortable and confident with what I'm saying, right? So, like, don't get me wrong. If someone says, you just said this wrong, you said this, you said that, those two things aren't compatible, like, whatever it is, like, if there's a criticism, I'm going to acknowledge the criticism. If I said some fact wrong, like, so I'm fully receptive to that kind of stuff, and I'm happy to make an adjustment. But at the same time, like, I don't have any patience for all of the sophistry that people do. So if you ever start doing debates, you'll notice that tons of people just want to dodge your questions, right? Tons of people just want to avoid what you're saying and just hammer some talking point they have, right? So something that I do that I think annoys people, but that I will never stop doing, is once I actually get a question or argument on the table and it's come about legitimately, right? It's not that they've asked me something and I've answered with a question, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. I hate when people do that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless it's actually a question that's necessary to understand the thing we're talking about. Yeah, like if I ask someone a question and they just start like dodging it, like, what I'm gonna do is just say, I don't see how that addressed what I said. This is my question. Can you answer the question? Right? And they will dodge it again, and then I'll do the same thing. And then, you do that like 7 or 8 times, and there's at that point a split in the audience, right? So there's some people who I personally don't value the opinion of. Like, I just don't care what these people think, who have a reaction at that point of, you're being an asshole, move to the next point, do the next thing, whatever. But then there's also people whose opinion I do respect, and they just see that all that has actually happened here, when you set aside the emotional baggage that's clouding your mind, is I've asked a question and the other guy has dodged 7 times. So it just depends what frame you're in. If you're in this like friendly, nice guy frame of like, oh, why aren't they like talking like I talk to my nanny or something? It's like, yeah, well, I'm sure then you get triggered. But if you're in this frame of like, the goal is supposed to be getting to the truth, and the one guy's weaseling out of a question, then you're going to align with me and you're going to be like, well, yeah, I mean, he's just dodging. Of course, you're going to keep asking the question. So, yeah,
I've seen you do that, like just repeatedly ask the same question, or just kind of point out like you haven't answered the question.
right,
Um,
yeah,
yeah, and obviously, again, I think I just want to highlight this strongly for my viewers, and again, I don't think we disagree on this, Isaac. That when you have an audience, intellectually destroying someone can be really powerful because they recognize the faults of, and probably not probably, definitely the more skilled, the more intelligent the perception is of the person with whom you're debating, the better it is, right? If you destroy that person, it's like, holy crap, this person who we really respect or we look up to can't, that's why I think Sam Harris, for example, would be a fantastic debate, I wonder where does Sam fall on this, and has he spoken? I think I remember looking this up briefly, but I don't remember what it was. Where does Sam Harris stand on veganism?
Well, I couldn't give the history of his position here perfectly, but he was a carnivore. He tried going vegan when he was younger. He said he got anemic. Obviously, if that's true, he wasn't eating a proper vegan diet. So then a while back, he had a stream. I think it was with Paul Bloom, and they, I guess podcast, not stream, and they talked about veganism, or at least about animal ethics. And then Sam became convinced that he has to go vegetarian. He tried going vegetarian, and then he ended up back at eating meat somehow. And then I don't know if you've seen the video where I asked him to name the trait, but the reception on that video is some of the most one-sided reception I've ever seen on a video. Honestly, the whole comment section is just like, wow, he's just dancing around the question. So I think that now he's at a point where he's just not really thinking about the topic anymore, and he's just back to eating meat. And I don't think he has good arguments. And he'll say I mean, I don't even know. I could go into little things he says, but yeah, I don't think he has a solid position, and he's no longer vegetarian.
Yeah, but I think you draw, and this is the frustration I think with debating, is when people either recognize on a conscious level or a subconscious level that they're trapped, that they're wrong, that they have to concede everything. They just avoid. They're just like, let's just not talk about this anymore. And it's like, God damn, this is where it's like, what was the point of all this debate? Right. If we can't get to that point, again, for that individual, again, if you're convincing an audience, of course, it's going to be clear that, hey, this person couldn't conclude their logical point or had to evade the question. And it kind of just support your point of view, right?
Well, exactly. So today, for example, I debated a well-known sophist called Vegan Foot Soldier. Now, it got to a point very quickly where it was obvious that he didn't actually have an argument for his position, right? So he was making a statement. He was making a positive claim in the debate, but he couldn't actually provide an argument for his position, right? So he just kept trying to talk around the point and dodge, and I just kept asking for an argument over and over again. And then, eventually it just reaches a level where it's just like, well, I mean, this guy is just full of shit. He's not even trying honestly to give an argument anymore. So, yeah, sorry, my mind's a bit all over the place. It's just, there's people who just aren't honest, and you interact with them and they just dodge and bullshit. And that's just the reality of it. So all you can really do is just expose that. And eventually you reach a point where you just have to be like, look, there's nothing else to say here. And if you want to, come up with an argument, or if you want to, do something that can allow the conversation to advance, you want to answer the question instead of dodging, or you want to come up with an argument instead of pretending you have one when you don't, or, whatever it is, then we can continue. But if you're not willing to make that step, then there's just not really anything that there's nothing else to be said, right? I just don't know what else I can do with you. Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going back through the chat here, and I saw a statement from Carly who mentioned listening and how important listening is. And maybe I was curious if you could comment on that. When you're debating someone, how important it is to not just kind of wait to speak, but actually listen to understand.
It's incredibly important. Now, here's the misconception people have about me. They think when someone talks for 2 minutes and then I just reply by saying that didn't answer my question, where's the answer to my question, that indicates that I haven't been listening. Well, no, I'm listening attentively for you to answer my question, right? So in a debate, the way I'm listening to someone is it's just I'm listening to them speak, and I'm just waiting for the part where they address my question. And if I don't hear it, then I'm just going to say I heard a lot of words, but I didn't hear my question. If you addressed it, I didn't catch it, so I need you to actually spell out the answer to my question. So I think that in the context of debate, when you're the one cross-examining, you don't have to listen to, you don't have to follow all their weird tangents. You just have to pay attention to when they're actually addressing the thing that you ask them. But if you're the one being cross-examined, you certainly want to listen to every word of what they're saying. And if you're having a street interaction, you also definitely want to listen to every word of what the other person's saying. So just to be clear, it depends a bit on context. And the one context where I shift a bit on this is when you're cross-examining. It's not that you shouldn't listen. It's just that you don't have to entertain all of their crazy pathways. You can listen for the part where they actually answer you.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That you don't have. Yeah, that's such a great way to put it, because people will. I'm sure you'll agree. People who don't have a solid point will usually do some sort of selective listening or selective answering. They'll go on tangents to avoid the main point.
Oh yeah,
and
of course.
This is something that happens a lot in street conversations, where people will very gladly dodge questions that I'm asking them. Now, my questions are not intended generally to disprove them logically. They're much more, I guess, like emotion focused. I'm trying to get them, like my main goal is to try and get them to connect with their values and then help them align their actions with their values, right? So it's like, what questions can I ask to bring their values to their conscious mind, which, they know that seeing this footage makes them feel sad, but what is it about that footage that makes them feel sad? And so they have to kind of explore that for themselves. And anyway, I don't want to get too much into that. But what I noticed is that people will happily go on tangents. And when people avoid my questions, because I know they're uncomfortable questions, I don't let off. I will ask this. I've asked the same question sometimes 3 or 4 times to encourage, to challenge people to think about this for themselves. And I think that whether you're a good debater or you're a good, the way that I like to think about it is like a coach, a vegan coach. These good debaters and good coaches challenge people. They don't treat them too easily because then there's no benefit for that person, or if you have an audience, there's no benefit for the audience if you just kind of let these things go too easily.
And they won't take you seriously. But if you're not being somewhat firm about what you're saying, there's also, this is a context thing, right? So if you're debating someone in front of an audience and the goal is just to humiliate them and make them look stupid, right? Then of course, when they don't answer you, you don't have to be nice about it. You can just say, yeah, I heard a bunch of rambling, didn't catch the answer my question, right? But if you're talking to someone on the street and the goal is to persuade them personally, that's just going to make them mad, obviously, right? In a debate in front of everyone, when the other guy starts getting mad, he starts looking like, if he's mad because he can't provide an answer, like he just starts looking like an idiot, right? But if you're on the street talking to someone and you're just making them look like an idiot for no one, all you're doing is like enraging them and getting nowhere. So there's like tricks that anyone who's spent enough time talking to other people will know how to deploy in those situations. So for example, like if you ask someone a question and they start rambling, you kind of have these options. You're like, okay, I can wait the ramble out, but especially if you notice they're doing it every time you say something, that's like, okay, this conversation won't get anywhere because they're not going to like give me the room, right? You could butt in and you could say, wait, but you're not answering my question, which that'll redirect it, but that could start spinning things in a bit of an adversarial direction. So you just have to know how to this is why I say that with street activism, you have to have good interpersonal skills, because you can overlay that in, and you can do things like someone is going to be very receptive to the interruption if the interruption has a positive emotional tone. If it's like a joke about something, exactly. Yeah, totally. And then you can just very calmly just put your question back in. Right.
Yeah. Actually, what I do if someone really goes on some tangent or they start rambling based on the question or right after a question I ask them, I'll listen as much as I can, like you do. I think we have very, very similar ways. It's just, you're right. You've hit the nail on the head there. I'll listen very intently to see. I'm trying to understand, how does what they're saying, does it actually relate to this question? And if it doesn't, at some point, then I'll just say to them like, hey, listen, I'm forgive me, it's probably my fault, but I'm struggling to understand how does what you're talking about, and I might paraphrase what they talked about, how does that relate to the question that I asked them, and genuinely give them a chance for them to explain to themselves more so than to me, right? I want them to like, oh yeah, and then sometimes I'll be like, yeah, I don't really know, I kind of got lost or something like that, and then I force them back to that topic, right? So I don't let off on it easily. But you're totally right. You have to use all of these like interpersonal skills, things that people who follow AVO know as the 3 Vs: visual, vocal communication, not just verbal. Like there's all these things we have to do.
Yeah.
So it's funny because it is a whole, it's not so much a whole different set of skills. It's almost like applying the same skills in a different way, I would say.
Well, you've done sales. So, I mean, to be good at sales, I've done sales too. You have to be good at interacting with people. And a funny thing is people think from watching my debates that I'm some kind of crazy like computer or something. But no, I mean, I like people. I love talking to people. And I did work where I talked to people and to get them to want to buy things for a while. You know, it's like, so anyway, if you do sales and you get anywhere far with sales, I mean, you have to be good with people. You have to be able to, you know, call someone up at 8 a.m. when they're pissed off, and when they answer the phone and are mad at you, you have to so quickly say something that is emotionally potent enough that they forget they were mad at you and kind of fall into that frame of laughing with. And here's another pro one for when you're talking to people on the street. The best frame that you can possibly get in with someone who's like kind of, you know, like they're a bit averse to what you're saying about veganism, is to get in a frame where the two of you are laughing together at the things they're saying, right? Which it could sound like that's a hard frame to get into, but when you're just joking around, it's very easy to get into that frame. Like you want to be serious when you're doing activism, but you know, like you just have to wait for the right kind of moment. And if you can just get in like some kind of like humorous comment or something like this and start, you know, that'll get positive, because then it can get to a point where they can present their justification, and it can be kind of the rapport in the conversation can be such that like they understand, they'll provide their justification. You'll kind of be like, oh, well, I mean, look, I'm not going to do it for that reason because blah, 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 blah. And they kind of get that it's like a friendly, like he might kind of like laugh at it, I might laugh at him. Well, you know, if you can get in that vibe, that's really good. And you also said one other thing there, that you kind of like, this is again something I would never do in a debate, but that it's good to do sometimes in personal conversations, right? So you hedged your statement that they're not answering your question. You basically did the compliment sandwich, which is like a classic way to not like set someone into a like negative frame when you're talking to them. So you said like, look, I might just be stupid, I might just be confused, right? So you're immediately disarming them by saying like look, the error might be on my part. I'm kind of laughing at myself because I know sometimes I like lose track of things or just am not following. So it's very light, it's very easy to interact with. And then once you say that, and then you say, I just don't understand the part where you address what I said. Like you'd say it nicer than that, but you can get it to come across in such a way that like you totally disarm with the first thing you say. Then you say that. And it can be an open face sandwich like that, or you could close it by again saying something like disarming or friendly or jovial or whatever. But that will like reset it to the topic, and it'll do it in such a way that you're not pushing them into like a negative frame. Now, one other thing, in debate, I would never do that, right? Like if I'm debating someone, I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, maybe I don't understand what you're. I'm going to say, I have no clue where you answered my question. You want to answer?
Yeah,
a lot of this is context dependent. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, it's funny that I think one of the goals. So talking about emotion again, going back to that, you know, like you mentioned earlier, that if your opponent in a debate becomes emotional, it just helps to prove their how weak their argument is, because you shouldn't have.
Can I comment?
Of course.
Can I? Being emotional is fine. It's being emotional and obviously wrong that people like. If you're like, because look, sometimes I'll get to a point where I'm like, look, just answer the question, right? And it's obvious there's some emotional tone on my part, but people might be like laughing along or whatever, kind of getting where the frustration. Like, what starts looking really bad is if you're getting really emotional and you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. That's when people they're just like, they just think it's a shit show and you're just making a fool of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So it's just not a categorical thing. It's not always emotional is bad. It's emotional and wrong together. That's particularly bad.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think in the debate format, it's almost like it's fine if your opponent becomes emotional. That's definitely not to their benefit at all. It's to your benefit in a way. And when you're coaching someone, when you're just one-on-one on the street or whatever it is, friends or family, the challenge with people becoming emotional there is they just shut down. Their logical sense, their ability to think clearly disappears. And so I do everything possible, but it does come from a genuine place. So a lot of people think that salespeople are all dishonest, manipulative, sneaky bastards, you know? And it's like, some people, a lot of them are. So let's be real, a lot of them are. But when you're trying to actually set, you know, especially you're trying to build a long-term career in sales, right? You're trying to, you know, develop long-term relationships with large, multi-billion-dollar organizations. You can't pull the wool over people's eyes. Is that a speciesist expression? I'm not sure. But you can't. Is it? I don't know. You can't lie to people.
Yeah.
They'll catch on pretty quickly, and you'll lose a lot of rapport. So in these one-on-one street conversations, I genuinely don't want to think that I'm more intelligent or that I'm right and they're wrong. I mean, yeah, I do believe that. Obviously, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing.
There's another side, though, right? Because you can go too far in that direction. You can also, if you start taking too strong frame of like, I'm not going to be assertive, it's not that I'm right and you're wrong, then you come off patronizing, right? You have, it's like this perfect middle point of, you can't be like forcing your opinion down their throat, but you can't also be saying like, I don't have any idea if I'm right about my opinion, but like, it just kind of seems like it makes sense. Doesn't kind of seem like it to you. Like, it's like, you have to find that middle ground where you're not pushing on them and patronizing.
Yeah. I mean, so if you, I'd be very interested in your critique of some of my work, and maybe, I mean, there's a lot of webinars out there right now. They're each pretty long, but I might even give you just one to watch if you're up for it, and then I would love your feedback on it. But it's like, I'm not even trying to prove anything to them in these conversations. I'm more trying to facilitate their own thought to get them to these conclusions, but not coming from me. It's just asking them a ton of questions to get them as far as I can. Anyway. But my point was basically that, yeah, all the things that I do, like where I say that, where I'm like, it may be my fault that I didn't make this connection, that I didn't understand it. It's possible. It's possible. I mean, maybe somebody else may have realized how they were connecting it, and maybe there is a connection. Like sometimes I say that and they're like, oh, what I mean is this. And I'm like, gotcha. Right. And sometimes
it does make sense.
Sometimes it doesn't make sense. But before I know that, I try to, I mean, this is in these types of conversations, I try to avoid making assumptions at all costs, you know, because I think whenever I do make assumptions, it only harms the conversation, the rapport, and then their ability to think clearly. So anyway, I mean, we could probably chat about this for a long time, and we've gone an hour now. So what I'd love to do is open the floor up to people that are.
Before you do that.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry. Can I just say one more thing to what you just said?
Yeah, of course.
So another thing you're really getting at is the intention that you have in the conversation. You talk about people realize if you're lying to them, right? Well, some people won't, but the rate at which people will realize is higher if you're lying. Like you notice this in sales, right? Like if you were to bullshit someone, it's like you'd still get a certain amount of sales, right? But if you don't bullshit, it's just a higher percentage. So with where you're, what, do you not agree with that? You can still make sales bullshitting someone, but if you're coming from a place that's more like relatable and you're doing things honestly, you're gonna get more sales with that.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Sorry, I was just like processing. Yeah.
It was the way you were reacting to it. I was like, am I saying something crazy? So yeah. But you seem focused on.
By the way, Isaac, I'm trying to multitask as well. So I was listening to you. And there are people putting stuff in the chat. So I think my facial reaction was to something in the chat. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Oh, it's fine. So basically, but you're talking about like almost like the intention behind what you're saying. And this is huge, right? Because people sense your intention and realize also, like when you sense someone's intention, when you're like, oh, that person's just trying to get something from me, or like this person, you know, that they're just trying to like shame me, or it's like when you sense someone's intention, just realize there's other people out there who are like way more sensitive to that than you, and they're spotting way more subtle things that you might not even realize you're giving off with like your body language or something like this. And you can try to way your face looks, but you just can't do that. It just won't work. The only way to actually make everything come across right is to come from an honest place. You actually have to be in a mindset where it's like, sometimes you have to remind yourself, because it's also easy to fall out of the mindset when someone's frustrating you, but you have to be in a mindset where you're like, what is my fundamental goal here? my goal here is just to spread this positive message and to open people up to it. And when I'm talking to someone, all I want is just, if they're able to be open, for me to just show them what it is that I'm concerned with. And like, there's other corrections. You don't want your state to be too like emotionally heavy to a point that it like kind of it's too intense for people. Like, there's other things to correct for, but the big point I'm making is just that when you say people will notice you're lying, basically people will notice all sorts of like micro expressions, micro movements. And my point is just that there's no way to manage them all consciously while you're talking. Very difficult to do. The only way to fix that is to fix the underlying mindset so that the expressions just naturally come across right.
I couldn't have said that any better. We talk about that in the 2-day Mastering Vegan Outreach workshop. We talk about
Nice.
attitude. Yeah, we talk about attitude a lot, man. We talk about like, you can't fake stuff. You have to be authentic. And if your attitude is like, these people are idiots, you're morons, you're evil people. No, you can't fake. You can't fake being positive and actually supportive. So yeah, we definitely talk about that stuff. Dude, thank you so much, first of all, for joining us on the webinar. We're going to get to the Q&A, but before we do that, is there, you know, what, obviously I know YouTube, Ask Yourself, but are there any social media channels that people who are getting to know you for the first time now can follow? Where can they follow your work?
Well, I mean, the main one is YouTube. But what, like, look, you can find me on Twitter and on all these others like Facebook and stuff. If you go to my YouTube, they're all linked there.
Okay.
But the other place that's actually really worth being, like, you could for sure go give me a follow on Twitter, yay! But like the one that will really benefit you is go to the Discord. Discord is it's like a big server. It's a space where you can have a server. Servers have text and voice channels, and within our server, we've got a great community. You know, there's like the medical channel that's run by vegan doctors. You can tell if they're a doctor because it'll actually, if you click their name, they'll have the doctor role. They're all verified by our, you know, one of our local MDs in there. You know, there's lots of good debates. If you're trying to learn to debate carnism, carnists come in there seeking debate all the time. There's really great community in there. We have the logic bot built if you want to try to learn propositional logic again. You can learn it completely from the bot. If you have, like, I would say probably like early high school level understanding of math, like, you should be able to learn prop logic from the bot very easily. So yeah, I mean, go check out my YouTube for sure. But if your goal is like, you just want to learn a bunch of stuff, or you want to find a good vegan community, come over to the Discord, because that's where a lot of the learning can happen.
Yeah, and make sure that if you are doing that, like if you're investing time into learning the prop logic, all different debating skills, that you're then putting them to good use, and in the context that we discussed in this chat, which is where you actually have an audience. You're not just going out there and intellectually destroying people in the streets and being like, yeah, I'm the best. You know?
Yeah, you know, my friend once told me, or it was my cousin, sorry, he's telling me he went out with his buddy, and his buddy went up to the bar and saw this girl and just intellectually destroyed her, and thought that he'd like be able to get her interested somehow by doing this. It's like, yeah, like, that's not gonna work. And then I was going to say one other thing also. This is important, right? Because there's some people who are watching who are going to be activist types who are going to say, well, look, I don't have any interest in doing the debate stuff, so it's not really like it doesn't matter to me. Wrong, right? Even if you're not going to be debating people, understanding your philosophy at the level of clarity, that at a high level of clarity where you understand the logic, where you could like systematically write out what it is that you believe and think and why, and reduce it to its component parts and everything like this, like, that is all important no matter what. So think of it like this: the logic and philosophy, that all gives you a roadmap of how to navigate a conversation, even if you're doing an activism conversation. Now, the interpersonal skills, that's just something you're going to overlay on top, right? So like, what's going to happen is you'll be in a conversation and you'll be like, okay, that person reduces to like, it's okay to like rape an infant. Like, okay, well, I can't say that because that's going to put things in the wrong direction. But you have a clear concept of what the error is. You have a clear concept of what your response is. And then it's just a matter of having good interpersonal skills. So you can find a way to like communicate the problem with what they're saying. But yeah, the logic, even if you're not debating someone in a context where you're just going to be spewing raw logic, having that raw logic and philosophy in your head gives you a good roadmap. So it's good for everybody.
Cool. Awesome. And thank you so much for joining the webinar. I appreciate it. I hope people go and follow you.
Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. My pleasure. So thanks again. And for the people who are on now, we will get into the Q&A. For those of you who are watching after the fact, you might not get the Q&A. So peace. Thank you for tuning in.